This is the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you stories from the peak to peak, in print, and online. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area. It's been 3 months since Nichole Sterling was sworn into office as Netherlands' new mayor. In case you forgot, the race was incredibly close. Sterling beat out former Mayor Billy Giblin by just 3 votes. Back in April, Mayor Sterling joined the podcast to talk about her campaign and plans for Ned. After her first few months in office, we invited her back on, this time to answer listener-submitted questions. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. This episode is the very first edition of our Town Hall podcast, where we let you, our listeners, do the questioning. Over the past week, many of you submitted your questions and concerns about signage for local businesses, town proceedings, fire evacuations, and, of course, the town's potential purchase of Eldora Ski Resort. And today, we've got answers for you. We're going to skip the headlines this time to leave plenty of room to hear from Mayor Sterling. Stick around for the end of the show to hear how you can stay in touch with both the mayor and the staff here at the Mountaineer Podcast. Before we get to the town hall, here's a quick word from today's sponsor, the Regional Air Quality Council. This year, set the summer trend. Take simple steps for better air and avoid idling your car when parked in parking lots, waiting in pickup lines, or in drive-thrus. Turning your car off and on again, instead of idling, can make a huge difference for summer air quality and helps reduce ground-level ozone pollution in the Colorado Front Range. Know when it matters most by signing up for ozone alerts from the Regional Air Quality Council. Learn more at simplestepsbetterair.org. Now, it's time to hear from Netherlands Mayor Nichole Sterling. All right. Welcome to our very first Town Hall edition of the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm super excited about this. I'm joined today by Nederland Mayor Nichole Sterling, who will be answering questions that our listeners have submitted over the past few weeks. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nichole. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on again. I'm excited for this as well.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed our last episode, and I'm glad we got to do this again. I know we talked about doing this again, and this time I'm not going to be the one asking the questions. It's going to be our readers and listeners, the people of Nederland. And yeah, so I think we can just dive right into it here. Our first question comes from Chris. And he wants to know, do you believe that the mayor and trustees should have power over the town manager when hiring or firing Town of Nederland employees? And I think this is a good question, but I think it would be helpful to provide a little bit of context here before we dive in. What kind of power does the Board of Trustees have over the employment process for town employees in Nederland? And how is that balanced with the town manager's role?
Yeah, and I'm going to take it even a little bit of a couple of steps back in like, how does the board interact with town staff in general? And to be honest, like, we have statutory authority over the town manager's role and the clerk. After that, it becomes an administrative function to where the town manager has, most of the say. Like, might the town manager consult us for our opinion on time to time? Yes. But not always. And in fact, there's a very good reason for this. So many people think that the board actually oversees the day-to-day functionality of staff members, and they don't, except for the town manager and, like I said, the clerk. And so where this comes into play is the reason for that separation is so that the board isn't giving direction to town staff that the town manager has authority over. Because when that happens, right, things can get really messy really quickly. So if 7 board members are giving staff members each different direction, that's not how you run an organization. And there's some real ethical implications for doing that. And so, no, there's not. So for instance, The board, however, can like tell community members, hey, this role is up. You've expressed interest in the past, like go ahead and go take a look at it. But we don't necessarily have a say over those roles that are hired, and for a very good reason. It just keeps things a little bit cleaner and less trouble for our town manager.
Yeah, and I think to provide some context, you did mention that there is a little bit more power afforded you for the town manager and the clerk position. How does that work? Is it like a voting process?
Yeah. So, for instance, if the town manager were to turn over and the town manager's role is now open, like we actually went through this process with John's role. We were the hiring committee. We were the ones who decided whether or not, who was going to come into that town manager role. And it's the same for the clerk. We have the statutory obligation that if the clerk, to fire the clerk and then to have a say in the hiring of that clerk.
Excellent. Thank you for that question, Chris. This next listener asks, as a resident and business owner, I'm curious what the town's long-term plan for the growing number of signs throughout Nederland is. They seem to be multiplying in walkways and public spaces, creating visual clutter, and during the winter, potentially becoming an obstacle or safety concern. Has the town considered a more organized approach to promoting local businesses, like a rotating spotlight at the visitor center so each business has a chance to be highlighted? It seems that there are other ways to support all local businesses while also keeping downtown more attractive and accessible. I know that this has been a hot topic, so would love to hear your response to this question.
Yeah, it's great. And I would love to hear some more ideas on what people are thinking in terms of creative ideas, because yes, the signs have been a bit of a conversation starter. We'll put it at that. And it's tough because these businesses want visibility. We have a one-way through, and for a lot of those businesses that are kind of on the fringes or inside the town, they want the visibility. And so, the idea of having some sort of rotating sign, I want to hear more. Like, what are the other ideas? Because agreed that it can create some distraction, it can implicate some safety issues, and so I'm all ears at this point because I don't necessarily have a great solution. And also, to be transparent, this hasn't been a conversation that has started up. This has sort of been handled at the administrative or at the, the town staff level. But hey, guys, like, write in some more ideas. I want to hear more.
Yeah. Thank you to that listener for submitting that question. I know it's like I said, very hot topic, heavily discussed. I know there's more that's supposed to be coming with some of the town bulletin boards that are potentially planned as well, and some potential grant funding that the city's going to be looking into as well.
Yeah. It's a tough problem all around, though. And until we get some, we just did get the wayfinding signage. There's some feedback and some things that need to happen with that. But yeah.
So this next question is related to the Big Springs fire egress. I know another hot topic. People were really nailing all the big discussion points. So Lindsay asks, with the most recent Big Springs fire, the second within a year blocking one of two ways out of the neighborhood, what's the update on the egress and what is being done to make this a priority? Are there plans if residents cannot get out? And why haven't there been any mock evaluations done to prepare for something like this? So kind of three-part question there.
Okay, you might have to remind me as I
yeah.
Well, can you actually? What was the first?
Yes.
Question?
So with the most recent Big Springs fire, the second within a year, blocking one of two ways out of the neighborhood, what are the updates on the egress, and is there anything being done to make this a priority?
100%. So some of this is not visible because we are having to have conversations with property owners and other local governments. And it wouldn't be appropriate for us to have those conversations in public until we can have those conversations on the side. It is a high priority. As many people know, I live in Big Springs. And just this week, I was responding to letters from a particular person who actually does not advocating a Big Springs egress. And suggested that the only reason why we're doing this as government officials is to check a box. I got really upset with that. That is just like, these are our babies and grandbabies that we have to get out of Big Springs egress. And you're right, like, this was the second one that happened. And the ones who are opposing it, there is a minority of folks that are opposing it. They're suggesting other roads that are just not feasible. And in fact, a few folks are going to show up this Friday to my mayor and managers talk that's happening at the New Moon Bakery at like 8:30 this Friday. What are we at? It's the 31st. So that I can visibly show people why some of these alternatives are not feasible. It's like almost worse than doing nothing at all. And so, yes, those conversations are happening, and we're pushing to have another public meeting very, very soon. Everyone just rest assured, like this is one of my top priorities.
The kind of next two parts of this question, I think, can be kind of bundled into one, but they're concerned about any plans for residents who cannot get out and if there have been any mock evaluations done with the current state of the egress.
Mock evaluations with the current state of the egress. Is there any more detail there?
I think maybe mock evacuation, perhaps, is what she's suggesting.
Yeah, I was actually literally just thinking about this the other day, because for me, there's like multiple things that have to happen with this resiliency, this like wildfire resiliency strategy. It's not just an egress. There's home hardening that needs to happen. There's communication systems that we need like better understanding of. It's like some people get notified, some people don't. We need like a better communication system in general. Like, and then backup is literally in my head, because I think about this all the time. Is like, how do I get my kid out? Right? He's 11 years old. Is it literally having rafts at the bottom of Big Springs so that people can get out via the reservoir? That's literally what I think through in my head. And like probably what if anything happens, we would have to resort to either doing that or swimming across. And so because I've been thinking about it, this is like kind of one of my next steps as a part of the overall plan is to go to fire and be like, okay, so if this fails, and this fails, like what is the next step and the backup? And so this might get back to Lindsay. And Lindsay, if you're out there and you want to write me on the side to make sure that I've like answered your question correctly, if this is what you were intending, that's kind of the next conversation is like, do we have multiple resiliency steps in order to get people out in case there is a fire up here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to add too that we're planning on opening another line of communication here. We'll drop a note at the end of the show where you can send me an email to make sure that I am interpreting your questions, because some of them are loosely paraphrased. I'm doing my best to relay what I'm reading here. So we'll definitely keep that line of communication open because we want this to be an open conversation. So yeah. And again, like feel free, listeners, correct me if I've misinterpreted also the question. Great. We're going to move on to our next question here. This one comes from Bert. Bert recently read that a bill came for a large sum of money related to the Eldora purchase. I'm assuming that this is related to the contract established with the Municipal Advisory Services Agreement with Stifel Nicholas and Company. Bert asks where that money to pay for it is coming from.
Okay. And so Bert, I want to direct you, because this question was answered in our most recently frequently asked questions 7.0. It's up on the website. That is being accounted for in our finances that we've paid for. So just go take a peek at that 7.0. And if it doesn't answer your question, then please follow up.
And just to kind of clarify something here as well, from my understanding is that contract was for municipal services. That dollar amount is listed in the contract. I believe it's $325,000. That is more or less part of that acquisition cost. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
If I'm to extrapolate, I think that's what it is. And yes, Stifel, that contract doesn't get paid unless we close. So, but again, it's in the frequently asked questions.
Okay, great. We're going to stay on topic here. And I think we will actually get to a couple of questions about the closing of the sale. So these next questions are kind of part of a series that were submitted by one of our listeners, Kristen, and it's largely related to the acquisition costs of Eldora and town reserves. So the first part of this question, Kristen asks sort of a clarifier here. She says, correct me if I'm wrong, but town reserves are funded by Nederland taxpayers. Therefore, they are, in fact, paying for the acquisition cost using town reserves, despite what's been posted on the town's FAQ page.
Okay, so I'm going to have to take that question. So, for all the listeners, I want to reemphasize this point. Because we are going through the bond process, we are under SEC rules, and I am so every frequently asked question and everything that we put out goes through our disclosure council to make sure that we are not going to screw up the transaction by saying something that is adhere to SEC rules. So let me take this question, and Tyler, if you can send me the exact wording of it, that way we can make sure that we respond in the appropriate way.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. So this could be a theme for the next few questions that she has. So there's a follow-up here as well. Kristen adds that by depleting town reserves, this allocates funds away from current and future needs that could be determined by a public vote. She asks, how does the BOT and town attorney wall off the use of taxpayer reserves under the NDA shield without disclosing accurate budget and expenditure information to Ned taxpayers?
Yeah, so one piece of this is we are under that NDA, and per our seller, we were always going to have costs for acquisition. This was always disclosed upfront in public meetings. And in fact, every transaction that has happened, and this is again reiterated in the FAQs, but every transaction that has happened has always been presented in a public meeting through our warrants section. That's always under the consent aspect of the meeting. So that piece I can respond to, and then yes, if you can get me the rest of the question, then we'll make sure that we follow up in an FAQ.
Yeah, absolutely. Her kind of third part of the question here, a follow-up to the last one, Kristen is wondering if you can at all share what the total amount of executed town contracts that have been paid for regardless of acquisition closure is, and new and pending contracts that will require payment regardless of closure. And I know that some of that information is public, so if there's anything that you can share regarding a number of that total acquisition cost, I think it would be beneficial to answering the question.
Yeah, so this was a similar question that we had written in this week as well. And again, I'll have to take it away, but all contracts have been in a public meeting, except for, the sensitive information that is held under NDA. And again, many of those are contingent upon the sale of the mountain. And so, but I'll take this particular question and we'll roll it into a next set of FAQs.
Okay. Kind of my own follow-up here. Are there any contracts that the town has entered into that are available in the public sphere that are not contingent on the closure that will require payment regardless if the sale is closed or not?
Yeah, and again, those have been in our public meetings, but there has been a request of hey, we don't want to go search through all your public meetings. Can you just pull those? Can you just give us the clean answer or the clean number? And so that's the thing that we'll have to go back and provide an answer on. So again, I know it's nobody wants to go and look through the public meetings. It's hard work. Our staff has to do it as well. So, yeah. But understood. I understand what the question is.
Yes. And we do it as well. I spend some time watching a lot of town meetings as a government reporter.
Yeah. It's tough. If you're not sitting on these meetings, right, it's tough to track, because we've been working on this for 2 years. That's honestly, we first went and announced that this was happening in the fall of 2024. So folks are all of a sudden oh, wait a second, what's happening? And so unless you've been really sort of close and paying attention since then, I get it. It's tough. I need reminders every once in a while too.
Yeah. I think in general, it seems like townspeople are very concerned about the amount of information that is and isn't being disclosed. And I understand that a lot of that is under that NDA secrecy and that there are, certain things that you cannot disclose due to the SEC regulations. And I get the sense that folks maybe feel like they have not had enough input over this outside of public comments. So I did want to give you a chance to kind of respond to this sentiment of townspeople who maybe feel like there is a responsibility to allow citizens to have a say or understand a little bit more of what's going on. And, maybe some folks are asking for some more transparency. Do you have a response, anything that you wanted to say to folks who are very concerned about this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say for again 2 years that we've been working on this, and all along the way there have been ordinances. And ordinances always have that time period where citizens can basically petition to say, we don't like the decision that you're making. We've had 2 ordinances as a part of this entire transaction. And in that time period, that 30-day time period where citizens could raise their hand and say, hey, we don't like what you're doing. We need to pull this back. And that has not happened. And so I think it's yes, there are questions in terms of why we haven't closed. We are still working on the process. And so now I think some of these questions are bubbling up, and that's okay. And it's perfectly okay. But at the same time, we've been going through this process and had the ordinances and have the period where people could petition to say, we don't like this. And that just hasn't happened yet. So now, we are where we're at, and we're going to do the best that we can to get people's questions answered, and then celebrate when this is done. So.
Yeah. Yes. I think everybody's looking forward to that possibility. So those were all the questions that I had for you. I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything that you would like to add before we close off here?
That was it?
That was it.
Goodness.
Yes.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. I think it was a total of 6 or 7 questions.
Well, I do have a couple of things that I would love for folks to be paying attention to is that we are going into a strategic planning process. And this has been something that I have been really adamant about, because if the Board of Trustees goes into this and they do it well, this 20%, if you look at the total time that a Board of Trustees allocates over the part of the year, over a full year, if 20% of that was really done in a dedicated way and put into strategic planning, then it would make for an 80% impact, meaning it's great if you know where you're going and how you're getting there. Instead of having these sort of loose, vague goals, I'm asking the Board of Trustees to be specific, and I'm asking us to be concrete, kind of what we had for that initial, 2022 to 2024 type of strategic plan. We kept on task, and many of those grants and those projects are coming to close and fruition. So I would ask that folks just pay attention to what's happening there. Look at the documents. Look at what we are talking about. My big thing is going to be resiliency and this whole conversation around wildfire. But then how do we build resiliency in other ways for the future, right? Economic resiliency, that kind of thing. And then the other thing I would actually just a public service announcement here. I got a letter from almost 13-year-old in Big Springs, and he says he's scared to ride his bike because of how fast people go up this hill. And I've got children, and I've got, little ones that I'm looking out for. And so I would just ask community members, if I'm starting to get a letter from a 13-year-old, please just slow down. This is, I cannot live on my conscience that a 13-year-old is feeling unsafe because people are zooming up. Speed limit is 15 miles per hour. 15. That's it. Thanks. That's all I have.
Yes. And I will also add, too, that as a government reporter, strategic planning can be dense. It can be very, at times, esoteric and difficult to understand. It is one of the most important things that your local government does. And it is incredibly important to pay attention and follow along. If you care, if you want to know more about what the government is doing, about what they plan to do, strategic planning is where you should be focusing on. It sounds super boring on the surface, but there are tons of little nuggets of information in there that can keep you informed as a citizen and can help you do your job as a citizen to hold government employees and elected officials accountable. So.
Maybe we could do a podcast just on strategic planning and
I would actually
going
love that.
I think it would be a great way to keep folks up to speed on what's actually, like, what are we talking about? What are the priorities that we're trying to make? And when it comes down to it, like, we're not going to be a good leadership and a good government if we can't prioritize, because it would be wonderful to do everything and to have 20 number one things to do, but then we are sacrificing the ability to actually get those things done in the long run. And so it comes to hard decisions. And I would love for the public to be able to comment more on those hard decisions that we have to make. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks to all the listeners who submitted questions for this. We really appreciate it. We couldn't have done it without you. And we hope that you get some answers and that your interest is piqued and that we can do this again. So one last thank you to Nichole. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Yep. And thanks everyone for your questions. And again, write me on the side if something didn't come through. So yeah, excited to have more of these.
Once again, huge thanks to Nichole for joining the show to answer some tough questions, and to all of our listeners who wrote in to us this week. We truly could not have made this episode without you. To any of you who submitted questions, or to anyone else who wants to hear more from Nichole, reach out to her at nicholes@nederlandco.org. That's NICHOLES @nederlandco.org. We would also love to hear from you ourselves. Tell us what you liked, ask more questions, or just drop a note to introduce yourself. Shoot me an email at tyler@themountainer.com. That's TYLER@themountainer.com. It's always great to hear from you. If you liked today's episode and you want to hear more town halls with Nederland or Gilpin County officials, please share it around. It's the best thing you can do to help us grow. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts to get the news the moment we hit the airwaves every single week. Once again, this is the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
To my hometown, everything seemed different but the same. I can't tell if anything's changed or just the inside of my head. I can't find out tonight, I'll just keep drinking instead.